As the vortex of spirits swirled around Oliver and Ilyana, a deep, guttural sound rumbled through the air. The trees around them shook violently, and the ground cracked open beneath their feet, sending tremors through their bodies. The spirits were angry, furious that their curse had not been lifted. Their cold, ghostly forms flickered in and out of existence, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The air was thick with their presence, oppressive and suffocating. Ilyana's grip on Oliver tightened as the spirits closed in, their whispers growing louder, more frantic. "We need to act now," she shouted over the chaotic noise. But Oliver was frozen, his mind racing with the weight of the decision. "I don't know if I can do this," he whispered, fear evident in his voice. The spirits seemed to sense his hesitation, their ethereal forms circling closer, their hands reaching out to grab him. Their cold fingers brushed against his skin, sending a shiver down his spine. It was as if they were trying to pull him into their world, to make him part of their eternal torment. But then, a flash of realization struck Oliver. He remembered the ancient texts he had read in the village library, the cryptic words of the original ritual that had bound the spirits. The truth that Ilyana had spoken about was the key. He had to reveal the betrayal that had occurred during the original ritual. He had to expose the lies that had corrupted the village's attempt to trap the spirits. Gathering all the courage he had left, Oliver stepped forward, his voice shaking but determined. "Spirits of the cursed village," he called out, his words echoing through the clearing. "I know the truth. The ritual was not what you were promised. The villagers betrayed you. They lied to you." The spirits paused, their movements halting for a moment. Their glowing eyes turned toward him, and the air seemed to still. For a brief moment, it felt as though time itself had frozen. Oliver's heart raced as he continued, pouring every ounce of his belief into his words. "They promised you peace, but instead, they trapped you in a world between the living and the dead. They took what was never theirs to take. You were not meant to be bound, but to rest. You were meant to pass into the afterlife, but they prevented that." The spirits stirred, their forms flickering more intensely now, as though they were listening, contemplating. Oliver's heart pounded in his chest, but he pressed on. "I don't know if it will be enough to undo the curse," he said, his voice growing louder. "But I know that you deserve to be free, free from the lies, free from the pain. If I can help, I will." For a moment there was silence. Then, the spirits began to withdraw, their forms dissipating into the air like smoke, leaving only the faintest traces of their presence behind. The oppressive atmosphere began to lift, the tension that had held the forest captive for centuries slowly fading. But just as Oliver thought it was over, a deep, resounding voice echoed from the darkness, one that shook the very ground beneath them. "Do you think your words can free us?" It was the voice of the spirit that had led the curse, an ancient being, far older than any of the others. It materialized before them, a towering figure of shadow and light, its face a grotesque mask of rage and sorrow. "You have exposed the truth, but that does not undo the damage that has been done." Oliver stepped back, fear creeping up his spine, but Ilyana stood firm beside him, her eyes filled with determination. She had been part of this curse long enough to know that there was still a chance. "We must face it together," she said softly. "The spirits are still angry, but they are not beyond redemption." The spirit let out a deafening roar, its form twisting and distorting, as if it were struggling to maintain its shape. "You cannot undo centuries of suffering with mere words. The ritual must be completed. You must make the ultimate sacrifice." The ground began to quake once more, and the spirits that had previously dissipated returned, swirling around them in a frenzy of anger and despair. Oliver and Ilyana had no choice but to stand their ground, their only hope lying in the truth they had revealed. "I will not let you destroy this village," Oliver shouted, his voice filled with defiance. "I will finish this, not with blood, but with truth. The spirits must face the consequences of their actions, just as the villagers must." Ilyana nodded, her eyes filled with sadness. "We've come too far to turn back now. If we must, we will fight until the end. As the spirits closed in around them, their fury reaching a boiling point, Oliver made his choice. With Ilyana by his side, he stepped forward toward the spirit leader. "We will end this, but not with sacrifice," he said, his voice unwavering. "We will end this with redemption." The spirit howled in fury, but Oliver and Ilyana's combined strength, both physical and spiritual, was enough to push back the curse. The spirit leader, struggling against their power, finally let out a deafening wail. Its form began to crack, splitting apart like a shattered mirror, its power fading with each passing moment. As the last of the spirits dissolved into the air, the cursed village fell silent. The once oppressive energy lifted, replaced by a calm, eerie stillness. The trees, the ground, the air, all seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The curse had been broken. Oliver and Ilyana stood together, their hearts pounding with exhaustion but also with triumph. The ritual had been undone, not by sacrifice, but by the power of truth and redemption. The spirits were free, and the village was no longer bound by the past. But as they looked around, they knew their journey wasn't over. The village still held secrets, and the curse had only been one chapter in a much larger story. For now, they could rest. But tomorrow would bring new challenges and new mysteries to uncover.